Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. Sorry we missed last week. There was technical difficulties. Knock on wood. That was actually me physically knocking on a wood desk for emphasis. We don't have the issues this week. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, a.k.a. Nerd Numbers. As always, this show is brought to you by our own voice of God, Brian Foster. Say hey, Brian.
What's up, Dre? And yeah, since this is kind of a more analytics-based show, of course, I don't believe in jinxing at all, so you did not jinx us for the show tonight. I think it's going to go great. And there's a lot of NBA stuff to talk about, too. So, yeah, it's great to be back, and we're getting towards the end of the season. Things are getting interesting.
So this is an interesting week. We're at the point in the season where there's just so much going on. We don't kind of have a cohesive set of things to watch. I will play spoiler if you're watching live, although we didn't announce anything, so I would be shocked if you are watching live. But we're going to start off with Russell Westbrook, the triple-double watch. Now, this is actually kind of frightening to me right now. Russell Westbrook is arguably playing well in a game right now. They are losing to the Orlando Magic, which is quite bad in terms of Russell Westbrook's MVP hopes. I'll get to that in a second. Russell Westbrook does have 45 points, but the thing about Russell Westbrook is I believe he could get 0 points on out for the rest of the season, and he would still average a triple-double. He's only at 8 rebounds and 9 assists, however. It's definitely feeling the pain because he's at 7 turnovers this game. But, the impressiveness of Russell Westbrook's triple-doubles can't be overstated. I've got an article I already wrote this year that I'm really proud of that points out that, you can't really compare him to Oscar Robertson. Now, again, this is the same annoying old get off my lawn thing. So I'm not saying this as a way to denigrate either Oscar Robertson or Russell Westbrook. I'm just saying if you look at the eras the two played in, they are so different that when you put the modern view on what Russell Westbrook is doing, it is darned impressive. Now, another subject that has come up that we've always kind of got back to is, impressive doesn't always equal valuable. So while we do put, I think, Russell Westbrook still in our top 5 in terms of what he's done for the season, I think, right? Is that still true, Brian, in terms of wins produced?
I believe so. Yeah, he's close. I mean, Gobert and Harden are ahead of him, but yeah, he's up there.
It's like Gobert, Harden, Kawhi, Westbrook.
Let's bring it up.
LeBron. I almost forgot. I almost dissed the king. So I mean, my kind of point this year about the MVP is I am not scared about the MVP race this season. Someone who wins the MVP this season, I'm not going to be mad. There's not anybody in danger of winning it. I wrote this article as well, Brian, very start of the season, where I actually went over some of the people I thought had a viable chance of the MVP. Both Kawhi and Russell Westbrook and Harden were on it. I believe Harden was the favorite at the time. Nobody that wins the MVP doesn't win without some constraints. The constraints basically being you got to be a top 3 team in the NBA. You usually have to lead your team in scoring, and you kind of have to have a good narrative to make up for some deficiencies in those other 2 categories. And so the point I kind of had with Westbrook is not on a contender. The Thunder are currently at 42 wins. If there might be some miracle here because they're down by 2 with 16.9 seconds to go. Anything could happen. And in fact, Russell Westbrook did have an amazing comeback against the Mavericks to get his triple-double the other night. But that being said, it's highly unlikely to me that they're going to pass 50 wins. If they lose tonight, the best they can do is 50 wins. And if they get under 40, if they get under 50, I don't think there's any shot of Westbrook winning MVP. I am sorry. I know there are pundits out there that think he's the legit MVP, and I don't actually disagree with that as a premise. If you put Russell Westbrook as your number 1 MVP vote, I haven't gone over this, Brian, but we do actually have the voting for writers. You can apparently look over that for the last couple of years, and I haven't gone over those in depth. But,
it sounds like a good post, judging the MVP voting.
It gets so freaking meta. Have you seen The Big Short?
No, or I've not read it either for that matter. So I really need to do that. Considering, it's our local East Bay guy here, our hero who, is involved. So, yeah.
But so what I was going to say about that is there's a scene in the movie where they kind of try and dumb down some of the financial crisis stuff, which is awesome. I think it's definitely helpful to say a lot of the stuff is really confusing and you don't know what it means. We'll try and explain it. Now, I think it's probably still more complicated than the movie makes it. But at one point, they kind of explain some of the housing crisis. And the issue was basically the banks were all betting on bets about mortgages. So like the interesting part is a mortgage is still a loan, but then there were people betting that that loan would go well, and then other people
This is the
betting that
mortgage-backed securities you're talking about?
exactly. And
Yeah.
so that was the issue. That the example they give is like a hand of blackjack, where they go, there's a hand of blackjack going on that the person themselves is allowed to bet on, but then you can bet on how well that hand, if that person's going to win or lose, and then I can bet on if you win or lose. And so what you just said, so I brought that image up in my head because we have, players that play, then people that judge them, then people that judge the judges, just kind of all gets. I'm not saying that article doesn't happen, but I'm just saying as soon as you said that, that's where I started thinking, and kind of, actually, I'll use that. We might jump back to Westbrook, but I'll use that to jump into another
Yeah.
topic. I'm gonna break one of my rules, kind of. So this came across my feed recently, Brian, which was this. ESPN, I believe, is going to rank NBA managements from top to bottom, and they released their initial list and said, articles to come. And I glanced at that initially, and I believe the way they're doing it is they're asking experts to vote on it. And so on that point, what I'm going to say, this is why I'm not going to feel bad about breaking my rule. My rule being, usually if I criticize something, I want to judge it in depth. Is my rule. Like I felt bad about some posts that I've dissed, which have had very real flaws, and my criticisms were valid. But I think if I'm going to do the due diligence of bashing another analyst's post, like with Kevin Pelton's that I did earlier, I owe it to them to read it in depth. And ironically, the byproduct of that usually is I'll have more complaints than I did originally, if that makes any sense. Like originally I might have had one major complaint that I could write a whole post on, but if I read their full post in depth, then I'm going to have more posts. But so all I really did is look at the methodology of this original post, and that they're saying a lot of other stuff is coming, right? They gave their original list. So ESPN, I'm sure you've got the story up. They said they've asked a bunch of people to grade the franchises based on coaches, presidents, and general managers and owners, and they're going to go through team by team. And so I haven't even read a single article on any of these teams that
And let's
they
just
say.
give the headline for people that haven't seen this yet on ESPN. It is 2017, the year we're in right now. It's easier said than done to say that. 2017 NBA management rankings from top to bottom, according to ESPN. This is what they're talking about here.
Yeah, and so my kind of issue is that I had stopped trusting voters in general. I've said this for years on the show, but if you're someone voting on an MVP or someone voting on a team, it's like you don't. I'll just say you don't matter. And most people do this badly. I mean, I'm not even going to let us off the hook. We've made mistakes too. It is really easy as analysts to make stupid mistakes, dumb mistakes, etc. And most of the analysts I look at, their statistical background, their reasoning, their logic is not good anyway. So it is very, very, very hard for me to go, why would I want your judgment on what a well-run team is? You don't know what you're talking about. And so it's very funny when you get the aggregates of this. A kind of interesting point is there's a very popular meme that comes up a lot called wisdom of the crowds. And the general point is you have some question you want to ask, and you could ask an expert, to estimate on it or something, or you could ask a crowd of people, what they thought. And if you took some kind of aggregation of that crowd, you could potentially get a better answer than you originally got from the original set of people. However, the issue to me becomes if you look at like this year's March Madness. This year's March Madness, all of the brackets were busted like really, really quick. So it's a funny thing to me. And then there was an ESPN article I saw that said, this season there are no problems with this, with how the NCAA tournament is doing right now, if that makes sense. Because their argument was, if I recall the article, there weren't any like weird calls or blown calls or weird things to be upset about. So as a result, there were no issues with how the tournament was going, meaning that they thought this was like a controversy-free tournament and everything was going fine. Well, the issue with that becomes, okay, if everything is going fine according to you now, then, and no one could have seen it coming, what does that mean? What does that mean for the wisdom of the crowd? So I'm not necessarily saying the wisdom of the crowd is wrong or using crowdsourcing stuff is wrong. And in fact, there are lots of things where that gets interesting where, if you ask an expert to predict something versus asking a bunch of people to kind of say something about it, it's much different. But it's a very specific type of problem, and I don't really think there's much value in asking a bunch of ESPN analysts who you think are the good players in the NBA when, the reality just comes down to it doesn't really matter what they think, right? If that makes any sense. So sorry, that was a really, really, really long tangent about this and why I don't care. But what I actually wanted to get into was some of the issues of actually trying to grade this in general. They have the Spurs number one, and I'm not going to go too much over the other franchises because I think it's probably kind of crap.
I just want to point out, though, Dre, before you get into this, I am wearing my Warriors light years ahead shirt today, and Joe Lake and myself are both pissed off the Warriors are not the number one ranked team because they clearly are light years ahead. But anyway, continue.
All right. So all I was going to say about the Spurs, though, is the one reason the Spurs are kind of advantageous is Greg Popovich has basically been in charge of that team from the late 90s. Basically since the Tim Duncan era. He was the GM before Tim Duncan was signed. He is the person responsible for, coaching Tim Duncan and all these teams to thing. I would argue that the owner, the general manager, and the coach have been on the same page on that franchise for almost 20 years now. And that gives us 20 years of data and lots of lots of coaching moves to analyze, lots of whatever. Now, what I will note is interesting, this is going to sound kind of mean, is I believe they also rank Popovich number one in coaching. Now, I'm not necessarily even saying that's wrong because, one thing that came up that we might talk, man, all these topics tie together, Brian. I hope I can stay on target. But one of the topics we might discuss is rest because, we kind of missed the huffabaloo, whatever word you want to use, last week. But, there was a big issue with the Warriors and Spurs resting all their starters in a marquee game against each other. And then the Cavaliers last second deciding to rest the big three. And, what this got was a lot of pundits coming out of the woodwork. It got like Charles Barkley saying, back in my day, it got, James Harden saying, I don't see the reason to rest, et cetera, et cetera. And so what was kind of interesting to me, though, about this is that, Popovich was ahead of the curve on rests. And you would argue, right, if you look at Charles Barkley, who tried to come out against us, first off, he didn't play as many minutes as players like LeBron James. Like that was an amusing thing. Arturo noted on Twitter that LeBron James has exceeded Barkley's maximum minutes in a season 4 times in his career already. And then, if you pack on the fact that LeBron James has played in 6 consecutive finals, which has not been done since the 80s, or not 80s, not even 60s, sorry. And then the other point is, right, the NBA playoffs used to have a first round bye into the mid 80s. And then until the mid 90s, it used to be a best of 5 in the first round. So it's the modern NBA in terms of how many games you have to play in the playoffs isn't even the same as it used to be. Don't forget, there used to be amateur rules, so we would never ever see stars in the middle of their prime playing in the Olympics, right? Obviously we saw that with the Dream Team in '92, but in the '80s, right, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Dr. J, they weren't playing in the Olympics while they were on their finals run. So the modern NBA, in terms of how many minutes players play and rest, is just not the same. So when people try to bring up the past, it's very frustrating. And so, sorry, to get back to Popovich, the time together, I have more tangents on rest too, and that is on our script, Brian. So we'll see how we get it. Popovich has done very well with playing the right players, with resting his stars. But then we've also looked in the playoffs, and that some of the biggest upsets in the playoffs have been against the Spurs. And so what I'll kind of say there is it makes it very hard with how you're trying to grade the coach. When you say coach, what do you mean? Because I think the reason the Spurs get very hard to judge, and this is why I think they're actually a good franchise, is everybody's kind of on board. And so when there is a misstep by the Spurs, it's very hard to pin the blame, which is a good thing. But it's also the exact opposite problem on other franchises where when something goes wrong on a team, is it the general manager's fault for making that move? Or is it the owner's fault for telling them they needed that move? Or is it the coach's fault for requesting a player of that type? It's entirely possible. Coach said, I really need a 2 guard, and they go out and get Bellinelli, and Bellinelli sucks. And, that was the coach's plan, right? The coach said, to make my scheme work, I needed this. Or even more so, we might talk this with the Nuggets. Oh, man, all these topics do tie together, Brian. When it comes down to the Nuggets, right, is it the general manager made a good move and the coach refuses to play the player the number of minutes to make that move valuable? I think the Nuggets with Fareed, Mason Plumlee, and Jokic, this season alone, you have three bigs that have been underplayed, arguably relative to their production. So it gets really, really hard when you're trying to judge a front office to know whose fault it is and how good it is. And if something goes well, why it went well, or if something goes wrong, why it went wrong. And more importantly, we always talk sample size on this show, Brian. It is really, really hard to get the sample size. So as you mentioned on this list, the Golden State Warriors are number 2. Bullshit. And I'm not saying bullshit because they're not a good team. I'm saying bullshit because we have no way of knowing how it turns out. Now, the team I will compare the Golden State Warriors to, Brian, is Joe Dumars and the Detroit Pistons. So Joe Dumars takes over the Detroit Pistons, and he is in a bad spot because they're to lose Grant Hill, who, by the way, like, here's how impressive Grant Hill was. At one point in NBA history, I don't know if people remember this, Grant Hill's like marketability. He was on commercials everywhere. Like, there was a brilliant Sprite commercial where Grant Hill would advertise Sprite by basically pointing, like he was lampshading that he was advertising Sprite. So it's supposed to be like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know, I'm just doing this for the money. But then he did it for a bunch of money. Like, there were some brilliant commercials where every time he took a sip, you'd see like $1.
Let's also point out the timing, Dre. He emerged as being the face of the NBA right when Michael Jordan retired, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that was actually a point. Like, he was viewed as like the next big thing, in part because I think lots of reasons, right? Being on the Detroit Pistons probably helps because, you know, the rivalry there with the Bulls. There was an All-Star game where he acquired more votes than Michael Jordan. So like, but you know, Joe Dumars is losing this marquee player, and he lucks into Ben Wallace, and he picks up Chauncey Billups off the scrap heap, and he drafts Tayshaun Prince, and these players all come together. It makes it rough for me, but he was good at defense, Brian. His offense sucked, but he's good at defense. You know, lucks into a trade for Rasheed Wallace, which I think arguably hurt them in the long run, but short run, that team that was really good at defense, Rasheed Wallace, awesome at defense. So, you know, he puts together this amazing squad that makes, I think, something like 6 consecutive conference finals, goes to back-to-back finals, wins a title. And you look at Joe Dumars, and like, from us, right, we are like, this guy is a genius. This franchise is great. How can you not just love the Pistons? This is a well-run franchise. And all it took was losing Ben Wallace and Chauncey Billups. And all of the moves Joe Dumars made, we went, what the hell is going on? Because, you know, he traded Chauncey Billups for Allen Iverson, and we were going, what the hell? And then he additionally went and signed, okay, let's see, it's Charlie Villanueva and Ben Gordon. And it's, you know, what the hell? And then that team fell apart very, very quickly. So when it all came down to it, Joe Dumars looked like an amazing franchise runner for a span of 6 years and looked like one of the worst franchise runners for a span of 6 years. So it's really, really hard to know. And you know, even when we look at teams like the Rockets, where you know, this season, I would argue that they do not look good in terms of their offseason acquisitions. I'm sorry, but Eric Gordon, sorry, just Gordons are overrated and bad, I guess. Eric Gordon and Ryan Anderson, and sorry, Google logged me out of my...
I'll give Gordon Hayward some credit. He stepped up this year, but in general, you're right.
Oh, and that good knowing the Gordons. Sorry, Google logged me out, so I couldn't...
Along your lines of questioning, though, he's only done for a short period of time, so he's got to maintain that.
No, we've liked Gordon Hayward. We thought he was good, and we still think he looks good. But I was going to say, their acquisitions haven't looked great, and if you really look at what's happened with that team, Clint Capella, James Harden, I can't believe I listed James Harden second, sorry. James Harden, Trevor Ariza, Clint Capella have just outperformed what you would have expected based on previous seasons. And part of that might be Mike D'Antoni. So it's kind of like, they get really interesting to look at because you go, this team is succeeding, but why? Is it the good general manager move? Well, to be fair, that general manager move was years in the past. And should we really credit Daryl Morey that much? Man, this is a really hard topic to talk in depth because it's so complicated, Brian. But it's like, all I'm saying is, if you take a team like the Rockets and want to grade them as a good or bad franchise, how much credit can you give each person? And out of all of these moves, it's really hard to know where to distribute the credit. And so that's just basically the point. So I kind of mentioned the Pistons as being this team that was an example of a good run, bad run franchise, and compare them to the Warriors, because the Warriors, even with the current management, have had some questionable moves where you go, really, you did that? You know, you didn't trade Klay Thompson for Kevin Love. Really, you signed these players, and then in the last 3 seasons, everything has gone right? They've given Draymond Green more minutes. They've you know, Curry has improved such that you could probably give some credit to that franchise for coaching. You know, they managed to acquire Kevin Durant, David West, and Zaza Pachulia. Now, arguably, it could be winners attract winners, but so what? But who the hell knows if
That's
that
not a
means
talent evaluation thing, though, right? For the franchise, anyone's going to take Durant no matter what. So I don't think you can give the Warriors credit for talent evaluation just for having reputation, which is maybe where this poll does help them. But yes, what you're saying is right.
but I mean that's the problem is how do you that's the issue. When I am grading a franchise, how do I know what is skill versus luck? And even if it's skill, because like Joe Dumars, all of his moves were skillful. Even Chauncey Billups. So for instance, at the time we would have said with Chauncey Billups on the T Wolves, well,
Oh, we've got some
that
delay on Skype here. Let's see. Dre, are you back? Can you hear me?
can you hear me?
Okay, good. I think we're back to real time now.
All right. So just anyway, the point being, all right, if you look at sorry, what team did I mention?
Detroit Pistons?
Detroit. Well, I was on Detroit, but I was saying the skill versus luck, right? Okay, so you were saying with the Warriors, you were saying, okay, well, the Warriors, they have these players that we don't know. Was it talent evaluation? Was it savvy movement? Was it luck? And you're absolutely right.
Just for Durant specifically.
But yeah, you are 100% right to say who should get the credit for that. We don't know, and that's the point. Because we don't know who gets the credit, and we don't know if it's luck or skill, it is really, really hard to know if that means the franchise is well run or if the franchise is just doing well. And obviously, based on a lot of the results on this franchise, on this list, I will say it appears they're very results oriented. I'll give you like an example. Boston Celtics are listed number 3. Fine, maybe there've definitely been some good moves that we are a fan of. And I'm going to list the Golden State Warriors as well here. So the Boston Celtics apparently 2 seasons ago really wanted Justice Winslow and offered the farm for him.
Yeah.
And luckily, my boy Frank Kaminsky came through in the clutch for the Celtics. He helped them immensely, just like he helped the Wisconsin Badgers. And Michael Jordan liked Frank Kaminsky too much to give up the pick, and the Boston Celtics ended up keeping all of their assets instead of going all in for Justice Winslow. Now, by the way, Justice Winslow looked very good as a rookie. We were like, hey, maybe that was the right move, and then now he's injured as a sophomore, so who knows? But that was a bad move the Celtics were trying to move, and they lucked into not making it. This current trade deadline, it's arguable if this was right or wrong, but apparently Jimmy Butler and DeMarcus Cousins were both on the block, and the Boston Celtics had assets, and like one of the rumors is that the Boston Celtics could have acquired DeMarcus Cousins, but they didn't want to pass on Terry Rozier.
Yeah, Rozier.
Thank you. I don't know how to say it. Yeah. That's arguably a mistake. We actually said that the DeMarcus Cousins trading was good, even though, people are now turning on him too. This season's very weird, Brian, because I'm defending Russell Westbrook and DeMarcus Cousins against people. And that feels weird because I've spent the last, one of my biggest articles was DeMarcus Cousins is not an all-star. So it's a weird year. So has Boston been making mistakes and it's just, they lucked into a couple of good players? It's really, really hard to know. And I don't really trust the voters to know it either. And that's the other issue I'll give you is like, there are only a couple franchises where we actually have like a decade plus.
That's why I want to ask you, Dre, where do you draw the line? So I think clearly the Spurs are number 1 since they've been the best franchise for 20 plus years, right? So there's no question there. We have the sample size. We have all these good moves. We know they did it. The Knicks, on the other hand, if we scroll on the bottom, they're rated as the worst team. Well, we have 10 plus years of Dolan just making terrible moves and bad teams, right? Kings, not as much time, but they've made so many moves in such a few short years. So, like, where do we draw the line? How many years do we need?
I think we definitely have a lag, but I was going to say part of the issue with the Knicks, their coach gets a 3.82 rating. I don't know. I'll have to look at the articles when they come out. Does that mean like for a stretch of years or current? How can you at all judge the current coach of the Knicks with anything, right? You can maybe look at, say, the Houston Rockets and D'Antoni and say, wow, D'Antoni, we've seen these players before. We've seen James Harden. We've seen Trevor Ariza. We've seen Clint Capella. Though Clint Capella's young, you'd expect him to improve. We've seen these players, and holy cow, putting them on this offense that's trying to take 50 shots a game, that is the right move. And some of these players are looking great, and they're going to win 50-plus games as a result. The Knicks went out of their way to target Derrick Rose, who is broken, to keep Carmelo Anthony and sign him to a contract with a no trade clause for Melo. and they targeted Joakim Noah, who was just busted for performance-enhancing drugs. I don't think it's fair to any coach on that squad right now to grade them at all because you have no way of knowing. But so when you talk sample size, I mean, really, right? We have the Spurs, the Mavericks, and I think that might be it. If you're going to talk like longevity of, if you want to talk longevity of the three things that matter, right? Coach, general manager, owner. I think you got like two teams that have actually had consistency. Maybe the Heat, right?
Yeah, because
Like,
we'll talk about Masai Ujiri on Toronto as being a good GM, but he's only been there for a couple years. He was at the Nuggets before, and that wasn't that long. So he hasn't been together with any specific coaches or owners for a long enough period of time. Maybe is that legit,
yeah,
or am I off
that's
there?
my point. It's also like Masai, right? He comes in, he manages to get rid of Andrea Bargnani on the Toronto Raptors, gets rid of Rudy Gay on the Raptors, gets Kyle Lowry, which was a move we bashed Daryl Morey for. He puts together this good squad, and we're like, holy cow. And then this last offseason, he lets Bismack Biyombo walk out the door and gives DeMar DeRozan a huge
Yeah.
deal.
Yep.
And of course, this is just the season where they're starting to regress to the mean, thank goodness. But start of the season, DeMar DeRozan's the hottest mid-range shooter in the history of the NBA, and Bismack Biyombo looks like trash. So, that's just great for us when we're trying to make a point. But no, I mean, we haven't even had long enough with Masai in Toronto to know if it's him. And I think we've said this before, because individual players matter so much in the NBA, a few moves make or break your franchise, right? The Houston Rockets, for example, we bashed their offseason moves, right? Ryan Anderson, Eric Gordon, stupid signings at the time, still stupid looking back at it now because you go, man, imagine if they'd tried to spend that money on anybody other than them and had Ariza, Harden, Patrick Beverly, Clint Capella. Holy cow. But the fact of the matter is, the fact that Daryl Morey managed to get the bird rights to James Harden 5 seasons ago, that's going to keep this team at least in contention for the next couple of years. And I mean, that was the scenario that happened when Daryl Morey inherited the Rockets. It had Yao Ming and Tracy McGrady on it, and while there was a lot of injury and sadness, as long as you have those two guys and some decent core players around them, that team's going to be fine. Now, to the same point, though, right? The Rockets just changed coaches. So it is really, really hard. And if they're, again, it says coming Thursday, Friday, if they're judging single season coaches, having 7.96 for Mike D'Antoni is a travesty. Now, they could be doing multi-year, though, so who knows?
Steve Kerr did just say he thought D'Antoni was his coach of the year this year over him or anyone else. Of course, he's biased since they have a long connection together with the Suns and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, that's what this is, right? It's just, what is your reputation right now amongst whatever panel ESPN has? I didn't actually look to see what their panel was, but some group of experts they have, I guess.
I mean, they've done this. They've done a lot. They do things like this for fun, and I've gotten curmudgeonly and get off my lawn, as I mentioned. Like beginning of the season when they rank all the players and they all vote. It's like, who gives a damn? One, you don't even line up with the numbers from last season. Two, we know from the advanced metrics. That's right, I'm being facetious. That many of these metrics don't take into account things that matter, like age curve, coaching, teammates, etc. So why the hell do I care what you think?
Let me argue against you on this, actually. So
right.
Here's my reasoning. So I get what you're saying, right? These analysis that are coming out here are not what we would say, we would look at, some other way to look at absolute production or, whatever. We wouldn't just pull experts, right? But I think that, let's say, you and I are running some team. I would say it would be advantageous to us to know the results of these polls because we would know the delta between the real value that we've calculated and the perceived value of the league, and we could use that delta to inform our moves.
And I've heard this argument, for instance, as a metric, because exactly what you're saying, right? Well, because I have, per may not be a good measure of efficiency. I'm trying to check subtly if Russell Westbrook picked up the triple double, but they'll say per might not be a good measure of productivity, but it tells us market value. And the issue is, we've said this a lot before, really boils down to just points, right? And that was the thing of per. Holy cow, Russell Westbrook did it. He got another triple double. Man, this is absurd. This is absurd. Just to break it down for you, I believe he was at 37 going tonight. He is at 38. The Thunder have 8 more games to play. I'm sorry, Brian. I know we're not really a live show usually, so, or at least we don't aim to be like a news breaking show. But that means he has 8 games to make 4 more triple doubles for the record. That's just wow. And the record is 41 triple doubles. I'm so excited, Brian. Triple doubles in a single season. So wow, I really hope he gets it. He's not going to get MVP, I don't think, although, as I mentioned, I think the Thunder need to hit 50 wins for him to have a chance at it. They can still.
Why can't someday they just say, instead of them being empty numbers, maybe it's just because his teammates aren't as good as they used to be. And I have this this tweet from Dave DeFore of B-Ball Breakdown up today that I found that I liked. The Oklahoma City is 29-7. Their record is during those games where he's gotten a triple double. So those don't sound like hollow numbers to me.
It's going to be higher now. I believe it's going to be 31-7 now because he won the one against the Mavericks and then he just won the one there. Although maybe I might be off by one. So he's either at 37 or 38. I'll try and look that up eventually. Holy cow! Does NBA.com run slow on this computer? Okay. Yeah, I was trying to see like records and stuff. But that being said, I completely lost my train of thought because of Russell Westbrook. Actually, let's talk that briefly. So the Russell Westbrook, I feel weird. Just get this tangent in. It's on the script officially, Brian. So you can jump around, although I have completely messed to hell your order, so it doesn't matter. I felt really weird this season because I've been defending Russell Westbrook against haters that have basically said, his numbers are hollow, he's being selfish, etc. And it's really, really weird to me to do that because, my claim to fame a few years ago, this is hilarious. At one point in my NBA history, I said, I'm going to live this down forever, Ty Lawson was a better player than Russell Westbrook. Now, at the time, true. Obviously, saying that statement and then waiting 4 years, you feel kind of foolish as Ty Lawson has turned into a train wreck. And even if he's still playing, is not good. And Russell Westbrook, I say and agree with, is an MVP candidate. He has been the last 2 seasons. He has been. I think I argued for him for most improved player last season. He was an MVP candidate then. He's an MVP candidate here. He's putting up historic numbers. And it feels very weird. And, the argument I'm hearing basically is he is a selfish player. Now, I don't disagree that Russell Westbrook forces the shot. I have no complaints with that. And based on his efficiency, although tonight, for what it's worth, he put up 57 points in 40 shots and 11 free throws, that efficiency is perfectly fine. And, when like Steven Adams is missing all of his free throws, that's interesting. I'm looking at the numbers, by the way. He put up more free throws than the rest of the starters put together, almost the rest of the Suns. Another tangent to get onto, Brian. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Enes Kanter off the bench in 20 minutes, put up 17 points and 10 rebounds. Why aren't you playing him more? Taj Gibson got 24 minutes and did nothing, and you got Enes Kanter on the bench? Sorry, this is just going to be the tangent show, Brian. But just defending Russell Westbrook, it's really weird that this is the season that people have turned to jump on him and call him a selfish player and hollow numbers and stat stuffer. And I think you nailed it at the start. It's just like, let's just note, a few years ago, he had James Harden and Kevin Durant. And by the way, it's perfectly valid to note that it is likely if James Harden and Russell Westbrook were on this team together, neither of them would look as they do separately because their skill sets overlap. And this was actually a point way back in the Wages of Wins. There's only one ball. And because there's only one ball, that means every time you take a shot, you are taking a shot from a teammate. Every time you have a touch, you are taking a touch or possession from a teammate. And in fact, defensive rebounds, that was one of the updates. Every time you get a defensive rebound, you are taking roughly half of a defensive rebound from a teammate. So it is absolutely worth noting. Yeah, if the Thunder had Harden and Westbrook, neither of them would probably be able to be as good as they are on their own, being the primary ball handler. I think combined they would this season have about 200 possessions a game each, like in terms of holding the ball. And I think the average team gets like 200 possessions. So, no brainer. Like there's not enough possessions to go around for both of them. But the issue that any super team makes, right, is you make that trade-off. You are willing to take some diminishing returns on star players to be a winner. So to say simultaneously, I think, one, absolutely, if Harden was on this team, Westbrook wouldn't look as good. But two, the Thunder still should have kept with it. And it's just really weird to defend him there when essentially his scoring efficiency, I think, is close to his career high. His numbers look great. Our numbers say he's doing great. And, it's really hard to, I'm not saying it's hard to stuff the stat sheet. That being said, the thing that's interesting about the NBA is Well, it turns out that there are rules. This is going to be like the big Lebowski meme. There are rules, and those rules dictate who win. And so when someone is gaming the system to stuff stats, that is a really hard thing to say, Brian. When someone is gaming the system to
Clark
stuff
Kellogg's
stats,
got a tough job, doesn't he, saying that?
heck yeah. So anyway, when players are doing that, they're winning the game. Like that's the funny thing is, when people are like Manu Ginobili's just a flopper, you're like, well, turns out when you flop and get called for fouls, you go to the free throw line, and if you do that, you make points, and if you make points, your team wins. So you can call him a lame player for that, but who cares? And it's the same thing here, right? Where yeah, you can basically say, oh, all he's doing is inflating his own numbers. And we've said before, there are ways to inflate your own numbers that hurt your team. And Westbrook, to a degree, does do this, which is if you take more shots at an inefficient rate, it hurts your team. So there are definitely shots that Westbrook takes that I will agree wholeheartedly are hurting his team. That being said, the aggregate, that's what you always bring up, Brian, the magnitude and the aggregate, he's helping out. So I don't really think Westbrook needs defending this season, but it's just been weird. And I think it's just, as I said, and when we were talking the front office evaluations, people really are just not good at divorcing team performance from individuals. They don't know how to do it. And so when Westbrook is putting up historic numbers and averaging a triple double, but his team is 10 wins worse than last season, they don't know what to do with that information. They don't know how to say, although this is a really freaking, sorry, I almost cursed, really freaking easy answer. They lost Durant and they stopped playing Cantor in the starting lineup. Like is that really that hard to, is that really that hard to notice? This the same point. I'll use this as an excuse to jump to one of my other tangents, Brian. I think I'm viewing this more as a checklist, like a scavenger hunt to just hit them all as opposed to an order.
Okay, well, I want to get in real fast before you finish up here, but yeah, go for it.
Point. No, go ahead.
Okay, no, all I was going to say is, yeah, that's what I wanted to bring up is that what about a different scenario than Harden and Westbrook playing together? What if Durant had just not decided to leave and decided to stay with Oklahoma City, and Westbrook had the same numbers that he does now? Although, like you said, he'd be having less points. They would have mid 50s wins, maybe close to 60, and Westbrook would be kind of a shoe-in MVP candidate right now. So I think it's 100% about Durant. And I'll say one more thing. What Westbrook is a more efficient player now. And that's the reason why we turned the corner on saying he's an overrated player to saying he's a correctly rated player, is he has brought his efficiency up. He is playing much better than he did earlier in his career. And it's really difficult to do what he does. So, yeah, I think your original point here is just right on. It's really funny that he's saying that people are saying his rebounds and assists are hollow stats. But no one will ever say that about points, right? For some reason, points is never a hollow stat. So, yeah, it's funny to me.
Well, they've kind of said that this year, but to me, the issue is why is this the year to turn? When I tweeted out, this was weeks ago, about that, there were some people that said, well, I've always hated Russell Westbrook's efficiency. It's like, fine, you're good. But if you are someone who has been calling Russell Westbrook an MVP candidate in the past, and this is the season you turned on him, and you weren't mad about his efficiency in previous seasons, what the hell were you talking about? And then you could also make the argument, this is the point everybody always makes, that players stretch the floor. It's like, if Westbrook without Durant is shooting better than he was with Durant, then you should be proud of him. And holy cow, though that's not what we say, right? We say a made shot's a made shot, and however you get it is however you get it, and make the shots. Take layups and threes is ideal, but if there was a player that could shoot 60% and get fouled 10% of the time from mid-range, I would love that player. I would be in love with that player. If DeMar DeRozan could have kept up that performance at the start of the season, then hell yeah, I would have been on board. But it was just one of those things where you kind of tilted your head and said, I don't think he can keep this up. And not saying we were right or wrong, but didn't look like he could keep it up.
And I should also point out, we did post his stats a little earlier when you were talking about that. He has regressed all the way back to what he is. He's just an average player now. He still takes a lot of shots, but he's shooting under 50% from the field now. So he just couldn't keep it up. He really wasn't that good.
Yeah, I mean, there are tons of stats like this, and this is one reason I'll give you. Let's talk Westbrook and Booker, unless you have something to add.
No, let's go Booker, yeah.
But so I was going to say, like, the thing about Westbrook that makes him so damned impressive is there are games that you see, right? Like, I think in the playoffs last year, LaMarcus Aldridge looked amazing. and we kind of said he could be the Finals MVP. But we also said the numbers he's putting up aren't usually sustainable, right? If you see a person who is exceeding 70% true shooting on like more than 20 shots a game, that's damned impressive. And so that's the point on Devin Booker. But it's probably not sustainable. So when you see a player like Steph Curry last year maintain however many threes, so what he cracked 400 threes, right? And so that's like over 5 made threes a game. That's ridiculous. When you see Russell Westbrook put up a triple-double, average a triple-double every night, and every other game he's a lock to get a triple-double, that is amazing. And so that's what's so impressive. But it also means when you look at players that are playing well, like we might talk Nurkic. Yeah, I got that right. I always do Jerkic because you point out. But if you look at Nurkic and Plumlee, when players in trades immediately perform really well, I always call this Remember the Linsanity. I have a post about it. You have to be careful and go, this player is playing really well, and it's really tempting to get super optimistic or pessimistic. You know, everybody's down on DeMarcus Cousins right now because he's not playing that well on the Pelicans. And for what it's worth, he's playing horribly on the Pelicans, but he's not playing as bad as I thought he would. I thought he would be an above-average player that might gain some benefit playing on a better squad. He has played downright terrible, but I'm not ready to throw in the towel because it's only been a couple games. So, you know, we always have to be careful when we see things that don't look sustainable, and that's why it's impressive when things are. And that I think I told you pre-show, Brian, like Devin Booker, I kind of had an existential crisis about this because Devin Booker scored 70 points in a game. Let's get this out of the way. Damned impressive, historical, amazing game. That's all you really need to say about the game. You don't need to compare it to Kobe's game. For the record, Kobe was more efficient. So already breaking my own rule. And I had a couple people note to me that Devin Booker is just not a good player. Yeah, you look at his numbers, he's not good. And, you know, there's a lot to be said there. But the real interesting reason I got on this is one of my favorite shows is Sports Night. Sorry, I shouldn't turn away from the right. But I might have it. I thought I had it on my bookshelf, but I don't. One of my favorite shows is Sports Night. And there's an episode where the two sports anchors, it's basically pretending it's ESPN Sports Center. There's an episode where the two sports anchors are fighting, and one of them throws the other one on a bus by asking him, why do we care? They're actually talking about the NFL draft. He said, why should we as the fans care that this person is getting drafted later? You know, like it's after the first pick. Why should we care that this person is getting drafted in the second round instead of the third round? And the other anchor freezes up and can't say anything. And that was the issue I came to with the Devin Booker game, because beyond saying this is a historical game, the Phoenix Suns are out of the playoffs. The Phoenix Suns didn't win the game. You know, the Celtics were supposed to win this game, and it didn't really, you know, to them, it kind of helped their standing because, you know, I think the Celtics currently are in first in the East. Devin Booker's performance in this game did not matter beyond being statistically impressive. And that was the why should we care point that you put on the script, Brian. That you know, that's all I have to say about it. It's really funny when we were putting the script together for this week's show, Patrick couldn't make it, but he did make the comment. He's like, really? You're not going to talk about that 70-point game? And I kind of went, yeah, I don't understand. Like, I don't have a reason to really care about it. And then, you know, even beyond that point, like, I'll put this in the same venue as Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game. If you look at the stats for that game, there weren't a lot of people there. It wasn't televised. Really, it just mattered for historical purposes. And, you know, to Devin Booker's, the sadness of Devin Booker, right? He is never, you know, Kobe Bryant's 81-point game gets brought up in relation to Wilt's 100-point game. So I don't think Devin Booker will quite get the same level of notoriety as even Kobe Bryant did because of that, right? Because it was the first game. But it's just, yeah, why should we care? I will note it is interesting. Like, it is the first game in over 20 years where a player scored over 60 points in a regular season game and their team did not win, which that's impressive.
Kobe almost accomplished that, but barely.
The last
didn't.
player way, Michael Jordan, like 1994, 1994, somewhere in there. So there you go.
Well, yeah. So I have the same comment on this that we did when Kobe had his game, which is that you know, if you score a lot of points, of course, like you said, it's very impressive, and it definitely shows a skill. You know, if they're focusing on him every time and he keeps shooting and keeps making it, yeah, that's really hard to do. But skill-wise, sure, give him all the credit you want. But what we try to do is take everything back to winning, right? Like, what actually wins games? And we argued with people about this for Kobe, and we probably will here too, is people just forget what the definition of average is. So when we say, you know, this guy shot below average but still scored a lot of points, yes, it's impressive
To
for
be
skill.
fair, I do want this just in there. Devin Booker in that game shot significantly above average. It was a damned impressive
I thought he
performance.
shot like 50% and went
No,
crazy
like,
from the free throw line, though.
so what? He shot 68. He shot
Sure, we'll say
68.
true shooting wise. Yeah, true shooting wise, he's very impressive.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing is, I don't give a damn what he had to do to get that. That we were just saying earlier. I don't care how he got the points. He got the points.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm just saying it reflects on his skill, but as a player, but does not reflect like on what winning basketball is all I'm trying to say. Because if you replace the average, shooting with average players, you're gonna shoot average. So yeah, okay, he was better than Kobe in this game, so maybe it's a more impressive game. But
It wasn't actually. Kobe was better.
yeah,
I mentioned Kobe's game was better than his.
I think my overall point stands though is these aren't the kind of games like we've seen for. What are some examples? Like DeAndre Jordan maybe puts up these crazy efficient games. Like those games are just so much more impressive to me for winning.
I've no. Well, so that's my issue. I think this is an impressive game. I didn't do the top 10 of the week this week, but it definitely would have been on there, and it was definitely worth a ton of wins. I mean, that's the point. Is like this was a Harden-esque game, or a Kobe-esque game, or Kobe-esque in his peak game, or even a DeAndre Jordan-esque game, or
That's
more
fair.
accurately,
I haven't looked
game.
at how many wins this game is worth, and maybe it's worth more than I suspected. But
It's worth
the
a
free
ton.
throws alone were crazy. Actually, he went something like 22 of 24 from the line, or 24 of 26. So that's pretty damn good.
That's the issue is this is a damned impressive game, so I don't want to take that away from him at all. But the why should we care is that its impact didn't matter at all, and it's done by a player that, like, I could be wrong, and I'm fine if I am. Maybe Devin Booker turns into a great player. Thus far, he has not encouraged me to make me think he's ever going to even be an above average player. Now, by the way, I said crap like this about Russell Westbrook, so just wait 4 years, people, and I'll be like, Devin Booker's the best scorer since Steph Curry. Steph Curry's ruining things, Brian, because you usually compare things to the past, and like now I have to compare everything to Steph Curry, which that's
Okay,
very
so I guess I'm trying to develop, my thinking on this. Like, why do I feel this way? I think it's really more of a hot hand kind of thing. Like, and the Warriors do this too. If Steph Curry or Klay Thompson start making some shots, they just feed them every time, and they do all, what they like to call heat checks, right? They just let them take a million shots, and of course we know there's a hot hand fallacy. They're going to start missing shots eventually. So it's clear the Suns did that too, and I hate that. I just want to see teams run their offense and try to get open shots. Feeding a guy is just never the right play, no matter how hot he is. So that's probably why I'm arguing with you here.
If he's scoring, sure. I mean, the to your point, the more important point, and I think we talked this a little bit earlier, is that it's unlikely he's going to do this again. Like this is not a feasible strategy every game, and so that's the issue, right? I think the reason you and I are both kind of mad.
Oh, we got some.
On it.
Let's see, we got some delay again. Okay, we're back. Go ahead and start with that, Dre.
I was going to say we see the delay, not the delay. Jeez, we kind of see the temporariness of this game, right? When Russell Westbrook puts up a triple-double, he is adding a triple-double to his record that is going to be a historical career. And when Kobe Bryant was putting up those games, overrated or not, he was adding numbers to a historical career. And this game out of Devin Booker is fleeting in every sense of the word. It immediately didn't matter, right? They lost the game. It didn't really have that much of an impact on the season. I mean, even if you think it really matters to the Celtics that one game, right? Because, like I said, they're first in the East. They're going to finish top 2 in the East, and it's probably going to come down to the Cavaliers in the playoffs. And who knows if home court's going to matter that much even in that series. Like if that series is over in 5, home court didn't matter. So this game didn't matter for this season. And historically wise, it's not going to mean anything to Booker. And even when we compare it to other historical games, to your point, right, efficiency wise, this is not going to touch some other net point games. Actually, that'd be a fun one, right? The best net point game since 1984 or whatever. That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. You haven't done that before? Or you've just done like career net points?
I think I've done career. I don't know if I've done games or whatever.
Okay.
But so yeah, like even in that, right? It's like a top 5 performance, but it's not even top. It doesn't even DC Kobe. So it's really rough. And I'm sorry, listener, to just be like, I understand this matters and I understand the excitement, but almost immediately after it was done, I was like, oh, long term, this probably isn't going to mean anything. And that's a real, like, that is sports, for the record. That's one reason sports is so appealing to me. People talk a lot about how how politics is turned into sports. It's our team versus your team, and that is true. And the reason that's terrifying, right, is if you and me go out to a bar tonight, Brian, and I say Badgers, and you say what, Cal Bears?
Yeah, go
That would be
Bears.
awesome, right, man? The Bears versus the Badgers. If that had happened in this year's NCAA thing, heck yeah, we'd be fighting like hell on this podcast. But the Wisconsin Badgers got knocked out recently, and a couple days after, I'm moving on with my life. It has zero impact to me. Whereas if I vote like hell for my candidate and you vote like hell for your candidate, and the next day your candidate gets in office, Brian did not vote for Trump, at least I hope to God not. Trump gets in office. Guess what? That has a very real impact on me for the rest. So like, it's funny for me to be upset with a sports game for being temporary when that is kind of the glory of sports, right? It's that it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, and that is a good thing.
Yeah, my last point on this is, from what I'm seeing, I think the mainstream media mostly agrees with you. I haven't been, although I have heard in the past people saying Booker is a good young player and everything. I've heard some temperance on this, saying, maybe this game, they lost. Maybe it's not that special. So,
well, that annoys me. The funny thing, I can never be happy, Brian. I'm never happy. It's a curse. I don't care that he didn't win for the impressiveness of the game.
Yeah,
that's actually not my problem. Like I said, my issue is that this game really had no stakes, right? And and Booker at the end of his career, unless I'm, like I said, wait 4 years until he's the next greatest scorer since Kobe. Mainstream score, obviously. Booker, this isn't going to mean anything in Booker's career, right? He's going to be a trivia question, which is fine. That's fine, but that's
I bet his agent is going to use this in negotiations, big time. Now, whether that succeeds at all, who knows?
Max deal, regardless. I'm sorry. Like the
NBA.
Agree. Last point on that, like the NBA is still not overscoring. Like, let's talk about this. This feeds in perfectly to our next point. I want to try and get us out of here in about 10 minutes.
Let's do it.
So I want to go get some food. There was this is so out of date, Brian. This was like 2 weeks ago. The Bucks at a game had an advanced analytics tweet, and I don't know if I linked it, but this tweet goes up, or I think this little screen goes up at the game, and it says advanced analytics, and then it lists points per game, and obviously Giannis is having like the best points per game since some other player on the Bucks, right? And it got roasted on Twitter. These people are like, "Oh, the Bucks people are so stupid. They don't understand advanced stats, blah, 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 blah." And I went, "Fuck you all." And so, man, I'm in a cussy mood tonight, Brian. I went, all of you people, because some people brought up like RAPM and BPM and win shares and per. I was like, all of you are using advanced stats that you don't understand. All of you are using statistics that you can't deconstruct and understand why a player is good or bad. The one thing about points per game, which admittedly, yes, is not a great stat, is I can still pull it apart and understand if that's good or bad, right? In Giannis's case, points per game is great because he is an efficient scorer. And so it gets very annoying to me when people try and have this very condescending, I know I'm talking about myself here too, Brian, but to have this very condescending attitude about advanced stats and you go, you don't know what you're talking about. In fact, it's kind of one of my pet peeves is when people talk derisively about things they're not experts in or don't understand. I get very annoyed. I think Patrick has said that before too, where, when someone comes up to you and starts arguing with you and is trying, and it's very clear they don't understand the subject matter, it's very annoying. And I actually brought this up too, where years back, this was in 2011, Zach Lowe wrote a piece where when Moneyball, the movie, came out, people were talking advanced stats, and he basically was being very derisive towards blocks per game or blocks per minute as an advanced stat, and said it's just the same thing as blocks per game. And I went, oh, no. See, you're trying to act superior about knowing more about advanced stats than other people, but those two things are very different because Brian and I can have the same blocks per minute or can have different blocks per minute and have the same blocks per game because that's a different denominator in that calculation. And so if I'm trying to use blocks per minutes versus blocks per game as a statistic, those are two very different calculations if I'm comparing multiple players. So, my kind of point was there's recently this week, Trump, is this real, Brian? I haven't fact checked this, so I feel really bad. Trump was in an interview saying like, we can't make mistakes, and then said the wrong name to the interviewer. Is this a real thing?
I haven't heard about that, but he does something similar to that every day. So the point remains either way.
But I want to be careful because, the whole, I don't want to say, yeah, fake news is fine. Fake news in general is an issue where it is way too easy for people to share news without fact checking it. You just saw what happened, right? I saw that clip or people tweeting about that. 100 times before I ever like had a chance to fact check it. And it's way too easy for people to do that. So, but the same point, right, is this person came out and said, these people are idiots. Why aren't they using better advanced stats? And the person said BPM. And I went, oh, okay. So you don't understand advanced stats either. So like, that's the point, is that people have a big ego about advanced stats, advanced analytics, but people don't really even understand basic stats. So I thought this was just a nice point to say, the word advanced, as I've said in the past, is essentially the same as the word like gourmet. If you go shop through the frozen food section, and you see, I saw this. I saw like gourmet pizza when I was shopping for food the other day. It was like gourmet frozen pizza. I said, really, a $3 frozen pizza at Walmart is gourmet? All right. So it's the same
Sounds
thing.
good to me.
Advanced analytics just means numbers, by the way. Like, that's, you can break it down. And advanced doesn't mean anything. So when people are getting all incredulous about that's not advanced analytics, it's like, no, shut up. It's
Yeah, the
buzzword.
Wikipedia definition of analytics is something like finding meaningful patterns in numbers. It's very general. It's very,
Yeah.
very general.
Well, I mean, that's those things like the cloud. The cloud, people have broken these up. Like when people say cloud computing, it's like cloud computing just means servers over there.
Yeah, it's been around for decades,
Big,
but all of a
big data,
sudden it's a big item. Yeah.
big data just means lots of data, numbers, big data, lots of numbers, really big data, lots. Anyway, so sorry. That's all I had. Okay, let's get to our last point. This is again way out of date. But we were talking about rest a little. And basically, here we even talked about this a few shows back, where Patrick brought up the very good point, which is to say a lot of the punitive stuff the league is threatening about rest, finding teams, finding players, doesn't really help the fan. So the only real issue is, like I said, we mentioned two games: the Spurs and Warriors, a marquee matchup, rested their star players. The not Golden State, the Cavaliers rested their big three, an hour before game time. And basically, in both of these cases, I think it's fair to say it is unfair for teams to not give advance notice about resting players, because huge things. Silver recognizes that gambling is important to the future of the league. God bless you, Silver. Daily fantasy sports also important to the future of the league, which Silver also recognizes. News matters to those two things. Fans that have to drive to the game, it matters. It is fair to tell teams you have to give advance notice if you want to do this. It's perfectly fine if you want to rest players, but you just have to give advance notice so the fans, the gamblers, the daily fantasy sports people all have advance notice. I think that's fine, because it's just a business, and you want to basically do what's right by your customers in the business. So I fully agree with Adam Silver on that point. The only argument I would have is the NBA really, really, really needs to work on their scheduling, because it's not that hard. It is, halfway through the current NBA season. It's a no-brainer, right, that next year the Spurs, the Warriors, the Rockets, maybe the Cavs. Geez, the Cavs are falling apart, Brian. But it's really obvious those four teams are going to be marquee teams for this year and probably next year. So if you're going to schedule those teams against each other, it is probably important that you make sure they're not on like 4 out of 4 games in 5 nights or back-to-backs. Because the other annoying point that I'll actually have to agree with teams is it's really hard to know what to do in the rest situation, because it seems like with like the Cavaliers, if LeBron James decides to rest, that's when the other players get a day off, right? Lou just rest all of them or none of them, right? So it's really hard to know ahead of time. So if the NBA wants to make sure that teams aren't screwing fans and other people, it really should try and do a better job of scheduling. And it's not an easy problem. Scheduling in general is not easy, but it is something that the league needs to put more effort into. And then just the last point, Stan Van Gundy, this bugged me because he was talking about it, where he said, back in the day, players would play every game, and they didn't have these fancy planes. The fucking millennial comment, which shut up everybody about millennials. People in the modern era, and we don't even count, Brian. We're old folk now.
But I'm a Tony Hawk's Gen Xer. Let's elect him president.
Dude, Tony Hawk, the video game was amazing. It's a shame how those bad too. Wasted so many hours in college, and I think Tony Hawk 2 on the PlayStation 2. Anyway, sorry, that's a tangent. But this kids these days have it easier. It's like Stan Van Gundy. I don't want to show it. I don't want to fat shame or anything. But Stan Van Gundy at age 35 was a coach at the University of Wisconsin and could not have played the same schedule as LeBron James, even taking a couple days off. As we mentioned, Charles Barkley just fell apart, didn't play the same minutes. So I really hate using the current rest on a few marquee games as an excuse for old people to say back in our day it was harder. I am sorry. I've said this before. I'll say it again. A modern NBA team would crush a historical team. That's just how it goes. The The Rockets, the Warriors, hell, even the Thunder would crush like any team from the '80s, and I stand by that. If we could do a time machine to prove it, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I agree. And there's so many reasons why that's true. And the reasons why things change is because they work usually. I mean, of course, we'll complain about teams doing the wrong things a lot of the time, but I mean, it looks like resting players does help. And it looks like, based on the numbers that we know, players do get hurt more. The one that's been pointed out a lot during this whole kerfuffle is players on the back half of a road back-to-back supposedly have 3 times more chance to get injured. Now, I don't know if that data is real or anything like that, but teams are at least saying that they're working off of data. So, maybe,
That's one point that I actually like is we talk Moneyball a lot on this show. And what was fascinating is in Moneyball, the small market team that can't win in the playoffs uses advanced stats, and the advanced stats catch on and the league starts using them, right? And lo and behold, years later, on base percentage and other stats are being used by other teams, and the edge that Billy Bean had vanishes. What's been fascinating to me is the Spurs have been an advanced stats team for years. We've loved it. And I remember one of the things that was very obvious to me when I would go to Sloan, like when Arturo and I were there, is every good panel, the Spurs would have someone at that would go talk to the like it was very obvious. Like there were panels, I was like, this is bullshit. And then there were panels where the Spurs guy would walk up to the speaker. I'm like, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, the one with the Spurs GM from 2 or 3 years ago, his name is escaping me now. That was a great panel at Sloan. Yeah, R.C. Buford. That guy is brilliant, and he's like the best right-hand man possible for Popovich, that's for sure.
But so all I was going to say is what was fascinating to us, and we've talked this before, is nobody started imitating the Spurs. Nobody started aping what the Spurs were doing. And one thing that the Spurs have understood: 3-point shooting, 3-point defense, and resting players for years. When they had that season a few years back where they won the title, that was a huge part of it. And so it's interesting to me that teams are finally catching on, and that was what was funny. People were like, "This is a major problem." I'm like, "Well, it's interesting. The best team in the NBA, the best dynasty, the team everybody agrees is the best franchise in the NBA, has been doing this for years. Maybe it's a good thing it's caught on." And actually, we'll give Andrew Sutton, normal co-host of the show, another point. He said, personally, I think tanking might be ruining the league more than resting the players' moves. I have to agree. I was going to do like a double negative. Couldn't agree more. That's what I want to say. Because it's true, right? Teams in modern years are starting to rest players. Well, guess what that means? Charles Barkley fell apart. Larry Bird fell apart. Michael Jordan, he did not have as long as a career as even like LeBron James is going to have at this point.
Everyone on the Spurs plays until they're 40, meanwhile, and plays well.
Exactly. So what's better for the league? A couple of fans missing a marquee matchup in the middle of the season, so a good team goes into the playoffs healthy. Don't forget, like, what's more annoying than a bad playoffs? Like, as the Golden State Warriors, how disappointed would you have been at a 73-win season to see them fall in the second round to Portland because they just had injuries? That would have been freaking stupid. Nobody likes seeing a great team lose because of injury, right? That happened with the Spurs too, right? Manu Ginobili got injured. They lost in the first round a few years ago. It's like injuries aren't fun. We like seeing the best players play against the other.
Well, let's take it farther, Jay. That is what happened to the Warriors, right? Bogut and Curry were hurt, so they didn't win the title. For the Cavaliers, is the opposite. Kevin Love was hurt the year before. This year he's healthy. Like, that's just it. That's really all it was.
The reason I'm saying, like, nobody missed out because it still went to Game 7. So I'm saying no game.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That's what I'm saying is, do we like losing playoff games with marquee players because of injury? No. So, but to the other point, right, we still have teams that are going out of their way to lose games, right? That's what everybody's saying about the Lakers. The Lakers don't want to lose their top 3 pick. And they're if they get the number 1 pick, they're probably going to mess up and pass on ball. So anyway, it's I agree where it's like there are maneuvers that teams do badly that hurt the overall league, the overall product. I don't think resting players does a ton to it, although I do think the NBA and like it's one of those where both the NBA and the players and everybody is just going to have to be really honest with each other and go, the money is the television deal. We cannot piss off the television deal. What do we have to do to make this work? Because it's stupid on both parts, right? When Popovich puts his players in a nationally televised game against the defending champions, that is a mistake, right? And the league shouldn't, you were saying this earlier when we had the discussion with Patrick. It's not fun to have the judge or the league have to tell them. But at the same time, they know and the league knows they know. So why don't they try and make some aspect to make it work together?
Yeah, and so everything you said earlier, I think it is happening, right? So even before this whole thing went down this year, last off season, the league already has made some changes. They've shortened the off season by 2 or 3 weeks, or sorry, the preseason by 2 or 3 weeks next
Excellent.
season. So the season's just going to start earlier next year in mid-October instead of early November. And there's going to be less preseason games, and that's going to mean less back-to-back. So that's one thing they've already done. And I think just getting a defined, amount of time is going to be what's key. If Popovich wants to screw it to his rival, David Stern, they didn't get along apparently. Now you can just codify that and say, well, give us 24 hours or whatever it ends up being, and they'll be able to maintain the competitive side, but then still, let everyone know. So I think they're getting there, and I think we have mostly agree on all these things.
And as noted, this is just my MO this season, Brian, right? I was saying, like, I was bashing Westbrook and I'm defending him. You brought up like shortening the preseason earlier in the year, and I was like, who gives a damn? And now I'm like, yeah, that's the right move. So, all right.
Well, it's what you said is still a problem though, because they are going to make less money because there's less preseason games now, right? So they are giving something up to do this.
I can't imagine those are as much, right? I mean, I think I'm focusing on nationally televised games or games that people bet on, and I think the preseason's hard for both of those. Is really the key.
That's true. It's the home gate that matters probably the most for those preseason games. The national betting market is such a bigger thing. So yeah, I think you're right about that.
All right, and now that they've increased revenue sharing, it matters. Like small market teams have less of an argument to say our gate really matters to our bottom line of the more revenue sharing. I just wanted to bring up, I don't remember, I think I got this point in, but in case I didn't, I just wanted to get it in again, Brian. Nurkic versus Plumlee. The argument will be that Malone in Denver did not coach Nurkic correctly, and that's why he's doing great in Portland. And that's fine. But in terms of this trade, we loved this trade, right? We thought Plumlee was a steal for the Nuggets. We thought Nurkic looked like garbage. Now, maybe we're wrong, though, to your point. It's very similar to DeRozan. He seems to be regressing, despite that great game he just had.
Oh, no, we've got another pause. Okay, good. You're good. Keep going.
But all I'll say is, if you are going to use the argument, the coach was making Nurkic look bad, and Plumlee is coming off the bench and not playing a lot of minutes, it's really hard to try and say it's a bust and that Plumlee was a bad acquisition. And that's the exact point we got to when we were evaluating teams. It's really hard to say Plumlee was a mistake trade by the ownership if they didn't know that Malone was going to just not play him and not utilize him. So,
yeah, and my point on this was just that even though Nurkic is playing better and Plumlee is playing worse, they're still like about the same, or maybe Plumlee's even better. It's just Plumlee was so far above Nurkic before.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's all I got. I don't really have I don't have any shout outs I can think of. I mean, I probably do, but I've been traveling a lot the last week, so I'm kind of out of it. And as you can see, this was a all over the place show. So I'll let you get your one shout out. I think I have a few comments to make, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, I've got a shout out to good old Oakland, California. Very, a lot of hometown stuff by me here, homerism. But the Raiders are officially moving to Las Vegas now, and Oakland stood firm and did not give them any public money to build a stadium. So, of course, the league told them to go to Las Vegas and take that public money there. And I'm looking at an SF Chronicle article here pointing out that the Raiders are still in debt, something like $100 million still, 20 years later, for when they moved to Oakland from Los Angeles, when they moved back here the first time. So, I don't blame Oakland for not wanting to get in debt a second time to keep the Raiders. I mean, what if they had, let's say 20 years from now, they still have two debts hanging over them. The Raiders are threatening to move again. Break the vicious cycle, Raiders. Kick them to the curb. They've done that. The Raiders still want to play in Oakland for 2 years while they're getting Las Vegas ready, and Oakland's trying to kick them out ahead of time, it looks like now. So, yeah, just, don't buy into that argument. Don't give any more public money to billionaires. That's all. And I got one more shot that's not in the script, too. Shout out to my cousin, James Foster, the new varsity football coach of the Annalee Tigers. Another Foster is going to become, a varsity football coach. So there you go. Good job, James.
And so what's that? Are they the expansion team in the NBA or expansion team in the NFL?
No, they're a California high school football team, but that's okay. That's okay.
All right, actually, if we're doing high school shout outs, I guess the Xavier Hawks just won the state championship, I believe, at basketball, because I don't know anything about them beyond that they're
Ooh.
close to my house and I keep driving. So go Xavier if we're talking local high schools.
I'm sure some of their players are already rumored to go top 5 in next year's NBA draft, but yeah, we'll see.
Actually, that's the other funny thing. Apparently, one of the graduates of Xavier is I don't believe it's Nick Urin, but he is one of the film people for the Warriors.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Funny to me. So yeah, Xavier, man, future of the NBA.
And the Xavier Musketeers in college basketball made a great run to the Final Four. And Charles Xavier was a great character in the new Wolverine movie too. So many Xaviers doing well recently, Dre. Well played by Patrick Stewart.
All right, I'll give one shout out actually. So your boy Draymond Green was talking about how he didn't really like the Raiders leaving and how Oakland's a great market, and he didn't, I guess he doesn't know the financials. What's funny is he said it would be like Boston leaving, it'd be like the Boston Celtics leaving Boston or the Los Angeles Lakers leaving Los Angeles. And I thought it was hilarious because the Lakers are called the Lakers because they used to be in Minnesota, the 10,000 Lakes. So it's kind of like, that was just hilarious to me, kind of one of the self-unaware things to say, to be like, why would this team leave? The Lakers couldn't leave. It's like,
Here's another one, Dre. Why the Warriors are leaving Oakland? Let's point that out.
I believe, am I mistaken, is that stadium in San Francisco still supposed to be
and publicly? So to the outsiders, it's like, well, these cities, are right next to each other, but to locals, it matters a little bit. So anyway.
Oh, that bridge is huge. Though what I will say is, does really keep up that gentrification of San Francisco, man. If you're going to talk about pricing everybody out of that market, man, between all the tech companies and now a big stadium, no one's going to be able to afford to live in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right. Well, anyway.
On that sad note, let's end the show.
Yeah, on the downer note. This has been the Boxscore Geeks Show. If you found us not through the website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. We go live every week, usually Tuesday or Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers. I've been your host, Dre Alvarez. You can find me on Twitter as Nerd Numbers. Produced by Brian Foster. You can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. A normal co-host couldn't be here today, but we did read it, a line from him. So in here in spirit, Patrick Minton, a.k.a. NBA Geek on Twitter and everywhere else on the internet. And if you missed the live shows, you can find us on Channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. Additionally, we're on Stitcher and iTunes if you want to subscribe to our podcast feed. Anyway, that's been the show. Lots of typos on my part today as the host, Brian, but I think we got through it. We will see you next week.